Magandang araw sa lahat. Today, we shall talk about data-driven development or 3D and the Mandanas Garcia Ruling. We shall call it Mandanas Ruling for brevity. So, what's it all about? Briefly, then Congressman Mandanas and Garcia questioned the insertion by Congress of the words internal revenue in the phrase national taxes found in Section 284 of the Local Government Code of 1991. Such insertion caused the diminution of the base for determining the just share of the LGUs in the national tax collection. The Supreme Court has declared such insertion unconstitutional. This paved the way for the inclusion of the collections of the Bureau of Customs in the determination of the base amount for the computation of the Internal Revenue Allotment, or IRA. It's now called National Tax Allotment, or NATA. In effect, while the 60-40 proportional sharing remains the same, with 60% going to the national government and 40% going to local governments, the enlargement of the pie with the inclusion of the customs collections and other levies collected by the Bureau of Customs effectively increased the take of the LGUs and diminished that of the national government. So that's for our brief background. This presentation has 4 parts. First, we shall give you the good news. Second, we shall tackle what I would call the reality bits and bytes. Third is what I call the devolution tadas or to-dos. We are putting some kind of a magic tada spin, as it looks like there's a lot of surprising stuff that LGUs need to do. Finally, in terms of data-driven development, what can the people do? Okay, ready? So let's dive in. First on the good news. More resources will be within the control of local governments. Second, delivery of public goods and services can be more accurately directed and quickly delivered to those who need it. After all, those on the ground know the situation better. Third, projects and programs can be easily monitored by constituents. And combined with the CBMS and other site-specific data, there is that greater opportunity for evidence-based planning and policy making. So, just how much of an increase in NATA for LGUs are we talking about? For 2022, early estimates from the Department of Finance put the increase in NATA by about 28% or roughly 234.3 billion. The projected nominal increase for a hypothetical first-class province would be almost 1 billion pesos. For a first-class city, it's 480 million. For a first-class municipality, it's 228 million. Now, we go to the reality bits after seeing all those pesos and centavos. Even if there will be an increase in the 2022 NATA among LGUs, there are mandatory minimum and maximum allocations that they must follow under the local government code, like the cap on personal services. It should be up to 45% of annual income for first to third class LGUs and 55% for fourth to sixth class local government units. There is a minimum of 5% of the total budget allocation for gender and development and a similar 5% floor for the Disaster Risk Reduction Management Fund. Another example is the allocation of at least 20% of the NATA to the so-called Development Fund, which essentially are the LGU's infrastructure and capital expenditures. Some might say that these mandatory allocations limit the flexibilities of LGUs to effectively respond to what is actually needed by the community. But I would tend to agree that these minimums and maximums can temper the potential abuse that might happen with regard to the LGU budget. Can you imagine if, say, 75% of the total budget for the year is all spent on personnel and the remaining 25% is split for programs and expenditures? Problema yan, di ba? Parang konti na lang yung naiwan for programs. But now that we are strongly advocating for data-driven policymaking, we can use site-specific data so that resources that would be going to LGUs can really be utilized to answer the particular needs of their constituents and be applied to, let's say, how the 20% development fund can be utilized. A quick look, for instance, at access to potable water of all barangays will easily guide planners and policymakers where water systems are most needed. Data on underweight and stunted children, which are regularly collected by barangay health workers, can be used to target areas for more and better school feeding programs. Another reality bit is the mandatory and optional positions within the LGU bureaucracy. This is a happy reality bit of information insofar as our desire to have data-driven policies at the local level. Because of the passage of Republic Act 11315, otherwise known as what I mentioned earlier, CBMS, the Community-Based Monitoring System Law, cities and municipalities are mandated to have a statistician in their office plantilla. We hope that LGUs make an earnest effort to hire the appropriate statistician to have interoperable statistical systems, not just across offices within a specific LGU, but statistics that can be shared, data that can talk to each other from the barangay, town, municipal, provincial, regional, all the way to the national level. Now, for some realities that really bite. Sure, for 2022, there will be an increase in the absolute amount of natas that LGUs can have. But an examination of the Commission on Audit reports for 2015 to 2018 by the World Bank showed that nearly half of LGU's capital outlays remain unspent. A 20% increase of capital outlay is projected to increase underspending by 15 percentage points for provinces and cities and 24 percentage points for municipalities. So we are really talking about absorptive capacity here. And while sure, NTA in absolute amount will increase by 2022, but for 2023 and 2024, it will definitely fall. Why kaya? Can anybody guess? Well, the national government's tax collection has fallen as a result of the pandemic and the economic slowdown that ensued. Members of the local government unit's local finance committee are well aware that the basis for computing the NATA is 3 years back. So for 2022, we are looking at the 2019 national government tax collection. So 2019 is a pre-COVID year and the economy and our tax collections were in good shape. That's why ERA or NATA will increase definitely for 2022. But the story on the tax collections and the economy for last year, 2020 and 2021 is a different story altogether. These are COVID years, and that's when we had the economic slowdown and, of course, the decline in government's revenue collection. And not only are national tax collections down, local revenues collected by the LGUs are likewise extremely impaired because of the pandemic. So, nakakakamo talaga ng ulo pagbaba ng tax collections. So later, daanin natin sa workshop how LGUs would cope with the reduction of the absolute amount of their natas for 2023 and most likely for 2024 as well. Using data-driven principles, how can LGUs strengthen capacities to raise their own revenues? Now for the devolution. Ta-das! Executive Order 138 has put in place the devolution framework that would guide both national government agencies and local governments in implementing the Mandanas Ruling. Essentially, it says that national agencies will just steer, parang sila yung magdadrive, no? Meaning they will just provide the policy direction, but the rowing and the hard lifting would have to be done by the local governments. In the preparation of the LGU's devolution transition plans, again, it is important to use data-driven principles. Do we have enough personnel that can deliver the goods and perform the functions of the devolved functions? Do we have enough resources to fund salaries, capital outlay, and operational funds for programs? If we do not have enough, how can we close that fiscal gap. The other questions are we really spending the funds in the most cost-efficient way? And are we collecting revenues in the most cost-effective way? How do we measure success in the delivery of those devolved functions? Bottom line, a lot of capacities would have to be built, starting from the generating real-time, correct, and accessible data, so that we are able to establish a baseline from which performance can be measured. What can the people do? I think the pandemic has brought to fore the reality that people should be active members of their own community to be real development partners of their elected barangay captains, concejales, vice mayors, vocals, vice governors, and governors. Mindsets are starting to change. It is not enough to vote for your local bets and afterwards, just let them be. Bahala na kayo, parang ganon, di ba? Let them be on their own to govern. You also need to change the mindsets of elected government officials who think that winning elections is a franchise for them to just do whatever they want to do and no longer consult the people because they can claim that they have the electoral mandate. Yes, it may be difficult to set aside time and effort. It can be frustrating as well if we don't have officials that are open to data-driven and participatory principles. But as I said, the pandemic and other development challenges have provided windows of opportunity for these transformative principles to take root. Members of CSOs, civil society organizations, and the academe can be active members of local special bodies, and most importantly, the Local Development Council. Makilahok po tayo. They can help design data gathering instruments. They can access, analyze, and suggest how the LGU's budget can be allocated using site-specific data as basis. And they can help develop performance indicators to see if targets are achieved and if the evolution is working. Dito na muna po nagtatapos ang aking presentasyon. Hope you can use this trigger input in the ensuing workshops and in designing responsive budgets and tax measures in your own communities. I wish us all the best of luck in adapting to the new rules and the new challenges before us. Thank you and have a good day.